Hello everybody and welcome back to the free online woodworking school where we aim to take your woodworking skills to the next level. In today's video, we're going to start sizing the door components and begin cutting mortises in the stiles. Let's get going. Right, so the first order of operations is to get the stiles cut to length. Remember, the stiles, the uprights, the rails, the horizontal ones. The rails, in fact, will not be the full width of the door cavity because the tenons on the end are not through tenons. If they were through tenons, they would go all the way to the ends, but because they're blind tenons, they don't need to go the full width of that cavity. We'll cover that later, but that's the reason why we're not cutting the rails to length at this point. We're just going to be doing the upright stiles for the time being. So it shouldn't need too much explanation by this point with regards to cutting material to length. Just remember, face edge always needs to be pushed against the fence. You never want to be flipping it round like this because if this isn't parallel, then either end may not be parallel to one another. In this instance as well, the advantage of having the face edge against the fence is that you won't get any breakout in that groove. If this was the other way around, however, and you were planing this way, then the bottom of that groove is going to be unsupported by the fence and you may end up getting a little bit of breakout in there, which will be visible after it's assembled. So face edge against that, and the groove will be fully supported. Let's get one end square and then we'll knife on the distance we need, cut that off, plane it back to that line and obviously check the fit in the cabinet as we go. Right, so the stiles now fit within the door cavity and I've just quickly drawn a very simple rigid orthographic drawing here to kind of map out this mortise and tenon joint that's due to fit within this groove because there's a few factors that go into it. Firstly, we don't want a big gap visible at the top of this stile, but at the same time we need to go deep enough into the component in order to get a nice strong glue joint and a long-lasting door. So we need to create a haunched tenon here. So the actual shape of the tenon itself will come in and then we'll have a little haunch that goes into the groove at the top of the stile, drop down about 5 millimeters, 6 millimeters or something, and then the rest of the tenon will go into the door and then it will need to stop flush with the bottom of the groove in the rail component going in here. So something like that. We can't extend the tenon all the way down because by the time we cut the sides off the tenon, there's no material there because that's already been fully grooved. So effectively that is the shape and the size of the tenon. One thing we've got to be really careful of when cutting this out is this area, because on this stile the grain's going to be running up like that, and as we're chopping in to get rid of that material in the mortise, we're going to be creating quite a bit of pressure on this bit of material here, which is short grain, meaning that if we're not careful, that piece of short grain could literally just pop off and we'll end up getting this massive gap in the top of the stile where it's chipped away. So in fact, I'm definitely going to drop that down to 6 millimeters, if not 7 to be honest. So let's draw that tenon properly on one of the rails, then we can actually see exactly how big that mortise needs to be. So I'll set the marking gauge to 7 millimeters, which is going to be how much we come down from the top of the tenon. So then all of this side bit will be removed. This little bit on the end will be dropped back to create the haunch, which will plug this bit on the top of the stiles. And so that leaves us with about 17 millimeter tenon. So now we're working on the stiles. So let's measure down that 7 millimeter haunch to start with. And then what do we say? 17 millimeters from there. So that'll mean we need to stop at 24, which is right there. So we'll quickly do that on both sides of both stiles. Now, if you've got a mortiser, you're going to be laughing at this stage because it will be so easy for you to clear out this waste. However, for us who don't have access to such luxuries and we need to do this by hand, there's a couple of ways of going about that. Firstly, I think there's this attraction by a lot of tutors to do mortising entirely by hand, you know, literally just with a mallet and chisel. I actually taught it in a previous video, but in reality, there are definitely more efficient ways of doing it. You know, of course, you could just get one of the Festool domino machines and buzz that in there and be done with it, but we do want to create a proper mortise and tenon here. but clearing out that mortise is a very time-consuming task, not to mention easy to get inaccurate as well. So in this instance, I'm going to drill out a lot of the waste beforehand and then clear it up with a chisel afterwards, and then that will also reduce the risk of accidentally breaking off that fragile end grain above the mortise. So when you're doing this, make sure you get a drill bit that matches the width of that groove perfectly, 6mm in this case, and when you're drilling, sight along the component, so in the view that me and you have at the moment. That way you can see if you're actually going down straight or not. If you're looking at it from this angle, I can't actually see if I'm going down vertical, and I might be overcompensating or undercompensating. So always look along the component to ensure it's going in straight. And in terms of drill bits, it shouldn't make much of a difference if you're using a brad point or just a standard twist drill. In this case, I'm using a brad point because it's just locking into the bottom of that mortise a little bit better. But instead of using a handheld drill, I'm going to go halfway between that and a mortiser and use a pillar drill instead. So I've set the fence up to the desired offset, and of course I've got a depth stop sorted as well, so I'm not going to drill all the way through. I did consider setting up a stop as well, just to make it easier to get that end consistent, but I would have to move that when I was doing this side of the component, and so I just thought it would be far easier to kind of eyeball it as we go along. Realistically, I think I'm only going to get about 2 plunges in this anyway, perhaps 3. We'll see. And then to finish these off, I'm going to get them level in the vise, get a block that lines up with the edge of the mortise, clamp it down. I should be able to use that as a pairing surface to square up the edges of these mortises. Right, and then finally we're going to line the chisel up with those lines that I squared across, bottom that out in the groove. And it's when you get to this side of the mortise, you've got to be really careful about levering out that waste, because if I was to push towards the camera now, I would most likely pop off all of that end grain there. So it's usually best to lever against the bottom of the mortise like that. In fact, I'm going to swap to a smaller chisel so I can get in there a little bit more freely. But I'm always levering against this side of the mortise, never the top like that, because that will almost certainly break. Right, there you go. That's how you mark and cut out the mortises for the door stiles. It's a nice, easy process if you do drill it out beforehand, whether you do it freehand. Remember, just sight along the piece rather than from the side when you're drilling it to ensure you're actually going in straight. Or if you use a pillar drill, no matter which way, it is definitely easier to drill it out if you can. Alternatively, if you have a mortiser, why are you even watching this video? It'll be so easy for you. I'm so jealous. And don't worry too much if they do look a little choppy in there. Mortises that are hand cut tend to look that way. By using that pairing block that I was using when chiseling, it makes it a lot easier to get those square sides. And when I was chopping down with the 6mm chisel to square up the ends, that should only be removing a minimal amount of material. So we're going to call it there for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do not forget to press the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and you can move on to the next lesson by clicking the link below. I will see you there.